You're listening to the Buildify Method Podcast, where we're all about mindset, systems, and profit. As a nationally recognized business consultant, coach, and speaker, your host Aaron Keith is passionate about supporting the entrepreneur community by sharing his knowledge gained from coaching over 10,000 entrepreneurs in nearly 20 years at companies ranging from billion-dollar enterprises and celebrities all the way to Main Street and small startups. Each Build-isode's blunt, no-bullshit conversation is led by Aaron along with his co-host Ryan Coyne, a veteran tech consultant and nationally recognized speaker. Each week, Aaron and Ryan deconstruct mental and physical aspects of the topics that challenge all successful entrepreneurs, while also providing coaching, insight, and specific advice on distinctions that affect all growth-minded entrepreneurs. So listen up. It's time to work on your business, not just in your business.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Aaron Keith, and I want to welcome you all to the Buildify Method Podcast. I'm joined today by my co-host, Ryan Coyne, and we have a special guest that we're going to be introducing in just a few minutes.
That's right, Aaron. Today is a very, very special edition of the Buildify Method Podcast. It's officially a Titans episode where we bring on world-class CEOs and entrepreneurs and talk about key topics and distinctions that are specific to the most elite part of the entrepreneur space.
Today, we have a special guest with us, Jacob Sudhoff. Jacob is a friend. He's a colleague. We've known each other for quite a while, and Jacob has a massive resume of being a serial entrepreneur. So Jacob, first of all, welcome to the Buildify Method, and please tell the listeners, a little bit about who you are, so that as we get into the content today, they'll have a better understanding of why you have some of the advice and opinions that you do.
Sure. Well, thank you both, Ryan and Aaron. I really appreciate it, and I'm excited to be on the show. So thank you for the opportunity. But give you a little background on myself. I started my entrepreneurship while in high school. My first business was actually I used to do lift kits and sound systems and sell them off to all my cohorts in high school, and it was called Southern Sound. I'll never forget it. My very first business with a good friend of mine. So we all used to mudding and all that kind of fun stuff, back in those days.
I love it.
But yeah, so my first business, and then I end up I used to ride horses and Arabian horses, and end up meeting this broker that sold these multi-million-dollar homes and castles around the world, and it just hooked me. And so I worked for her as a work program in high school, and then got my and just real estate just kind of put its hooks in me. So I've been in real estate since I was 16 in high school. And started in a little tiny town, Corpus Christi, Texas, and really kind of built up being one of the top residential and commercial brokerages in that city. In 2010, I decided to move to the great city of Houston, and it was time to get moved to the big leagues, and it was, I think, a perfect opportunity and timing. Sometimes everything's about timing. And, so things were going great. And so as I got up here, I decided I wanted to change my business model from being a traditional real estate broker into having more of a business model that allowed me to have more work-life balance. And so I went after new construction and condominiums, new builders, developments, those kind of things. But as I got into that space and breaking into a new market, you kind of find out that there's a lot of challenges and a lot of old relationships and relationships that are hard to break. And being new in the marketplace, I had to come up with my own way of doing it. And so, we started, in essence, identifying all the different types of resources and opportunities, I like to say, or issues, hurdles to overcome to be able to really break in the market. And so what we ended up doing was just, as we found a problem, we'd either start a new company to solve it, or we would actually, try to overcome it with our existing companies. But yeah, so, prior to moving to Houston, I looked at New York, Chicago, Atlanta, Dallas, Austin, Miami. I chose Houston because I felt like it was the easiest market to penetrate, and it was one of the largest markets in the industry. And I felt like there was a lot of opportunity here. So, doing my homework, researching it, decided that, Houston really had and I liked the trajectory of where the city was going in the state. So we ended up, building a new development brokerage focused on just new construction. I had to find a niche in the marketplace. And so we focused just solely on new construction, which I had not done in my previous past. And we took it in 10 years to take over 85% of the condo market of Houston. And we also end up doing, the number one in new construction luxury sales in Houston as well. But as we were doing that, we also, whenever we first broke in the market in 2010, one of the first things builders said to me is, well, if you can find me equity, then you got my listings. So we started a private equity firm, and for some reason I was good at raising money. And so started raising money to get the listings and connecting investors, family offices. I always say to folks, there's a difference between sort of like, country club money versus institutional family money. And
Makes sense.
We were able to connect with all of that. So we built a private equity firm. We found out that these guys need help on land, and land development, and kind of being able to figure out how to make something work. So we ended up buying one of the largest land planning firms here in Houston. Architecture, very important. We ended up buying into an architecture firm, and then one of the most recent ones was 3 years ago. We ended up, as we were building condos, we determined there's such a racket in the procurement game on all of our buildings and projects, and so it's crazy of how many overrides people pay on their materials. So,
it is.
So we literally started a procurement firm, and now that thing's off to the races. And we just keep on investing. In my most recent thing, we just actually invested in a new data aggregation platform. And we're continuing to invest in all kinds of different things, and it's just so serial entrepreneur, very much so. But my day job is I'm the CEO of Douglas Elliman, Texas. And it took me, I got introduced to Howard through one of our investors, a $1 billion family that had their condominium for sale on Singer Island with Douglas Elliman. They made the introduction to Howard. And it took me 2 years to get my deal done because I could never work for anybody else. I mean, being an entrepreneur, it's kind of hard to, have a boss and have the traditional politics of a big company. And so, but after 2 years, we got the deal done with Howard, and it's his first joint venture. And so that way, I kind of have a little bit more autonomy than just being a salaried employee. And it really has worked well. And so I'm very excited to be part of Douglas Elliman. I'm excited to have Howard Lorber as a business partner. And I'm excited to, roll out everything we've been doing here in Houston. And now with the Douglas Elliman platform, I'm able to roll it all out through the entire state of Texas. So
that's amazing.
That's what we're doing at the present moment.
Way to seriously underachieve and be a disappointment, Jacob.
I'm
going from lifting trucks to $1 billion company with all of these other ventures. I mean, it's super, super impressive. And for all of you listening, this is why we want to have Jacob on today. We're about to talk about a topic that I think is really complicated. There's a lot of aspects to it. There's a lot of emotion to it. And it takes someone who's a serial entrepreneur who has built multiple companies and has a staff to really be able to answer some of these tough questions today. So today's topic is really about what it takes to be a wartime CEO. So what is a wartime CEO? What does that mean? A wartime CEO is a CEO who's in the thick of it right now. There's so much going on in the world. A wartime CEO is someone who comes to the table and really confronts these challenges and helps navigate their business through the very, very tough times. So Jacob, today we're going to be diving into this. This is an opportunity for us to speak openly, honestly, and give our audience and our listeners advice from people who've really been there, who've been in the mud, who've been in the thick of it, and how we can navigate this. So Ryan, let's get into it.
Absolutely. So on all that, covered so far and the things that you mentioned, Aaron, which, it's a lot to think about for anybody, let alone somebody who's in the position of leadership. Given everything happening in the world, even things like work from home, diversity, all the different things that happened last summer with the protests, and most CEOs have been thrust into wartime, whether they asked for it or not, right? Sometimes you make a decision that puts you into wartime. Sometimes it happens to you. What advice would you give CEOs around leadership, given everything happening in the world right now?
There's what we've gone through over these past 12 to 13, 14 months. It's been of course, I do feel like it has been, in essence, especially several months ago, it was feeling like wartime. You've got a lot of issues you're dealing with, and you're dealing with a lot of new issues that you've never had to deal with before. A pandemic opens up, how some people have more fear of the pandemic than others. Some people, from the way that they interpret, the protocols that are now supposed to be, enforced or not. Trying to check the liability that you might have as a business owner, and make sure that you're handling all of the the communication and the protocols properly. Because as a business owner, you're always thinking about liability. You're thinking about cash flow. You're thinking about your management of your staff and your employees, but then also your clients at the same time. And not always do all of those interests align, and normally they don't, especially in a wartime situation. And so the idea is that it's to balance those all of those components, and your infrastructure. Because as I think all of us realized in this period of time that our infrastructure and our businesses came crashing down, with employees that if one got sick, then three got sick, then they all had to go home, and it just became a domino effect. And then there's a lot of services and things that resources that no longer existed. And so everything took longer, and everything, and of course, if everything takes longer, then your cash flow is impacted. And so, and then your clients, how to handle your clients and set expectations properly. So I think that a lot of how we, I think that some of the biggest issues that came out of this, or revelations, it was really about transparency. I think as we, I think that would be one, major point is, I think people, especially during this, I feel like people were a little bit more, when you were able to be blunt with them and said, hey, this is what's happening. This is my solution that that I believe will solve the problem. It's not going to solve it in the time that you want it, but at least it solves the problem with a client or a deliverable that's necessary, or meeting expectations and having to reset expectations. I think that that's a very important thing during all of this.
Yeah, let's talk about that for a second, actually, Jacob, because that's on my list as well. One of the things that I noticed with dealing with so many CEOs as they're navigating this whole process was transparency. And you said it really, really well. It's not just transparency with your staff or even sometimes with your customers about, say, cash flow. I think a lot of CEOs really have their cherry popped around, wow, I'm about to really be vulnerable with people. I'm not used to being vulnerable with people around my money and talking to their staff. And now listen, here's the facts. Here's what we're bringing in. Here's how much our sales have dropped. Here's our budget. Here's what this is actually costing us to run this company. I know a lot of CEOs that have had a really open, honest conversation with their staff by saying, guys, do you know how much it costs to run this company? Let me tell you, here's how much rent is. Here's how much our staffing load is. And really started to share that information with everybody. And seeing that transparency wasn't a weakness, but it was a strength, and actually had people rally behind that CEO.
It bonded us. It bonded the folks together, and it allowed everyone, because they don't know what's going on, and they never have really. And so it was the very first time that we were able to actually. We were very transparent with this. Was our cash flow. This now is our cash flow, and we started sharing month by month and week by week, and we actually were able to show them that, hey, here's our, if everyone wants, to get back at 100% salaries, this is where we need to hit just to be able to break even. And so that was very helpful to be transparent with the staff. Not everybody, I will tell you very bluntly, not everybody cares. And I think that's one thing that really came out of it as well, is you got to see we got to see a different side of all of your
wasn't
staff
that
and employees.
interesting how that kind of
And
transpired?
oh, it was unbelievable. It was unbelievably interesting, actually. And it was, it was telling, and it was really, it was hurtful, at some times, and it was also very difficult to take in some instances. But everyone just, but then others impressed you and made you just, will remember them forever because of some of the actions and things they did. And so it's just, and I will say that there were some really night and day differences between some of the reactions from some of the staff and managers. But at the end of the day, looking back, it was a great experience to be able to truly see a different side of everybody. And it really makes you now, it actually helps us in the recruiting process today when we hire new folks. We are actually starting to dive into some of those questions and try to find more folks that are of the type of people that you want on your in your company, part of your tribe, part of your village. And once you get those like-minded folks, it's crazy how much more successful you can be. And so I think that was a big win for us.
That's awesome. I was going to say, I'm super excited about this conversation. I'm in lockstep with you here. In one of my companies that I sold, we noticed in the pandemic that it brought the same thing. There were certain people that really didn't care and almost use it as an excuse in their performance. And we had other people that were like, hey, what can I do? Do you need me to cut my hours? Do you need me to reduce ... They were bringing ideas to the table. And it was really moving to see how some of our staff really pulled for us as a company. And also upsetting that some of our other staff were the polar opposite.
Oh, that was quite interesting to see, actually, is how people reacted to the other employees and how their reactions. And then of course a few of them tried to get together and tried to all come and poison the well. And I will say that we had that one of our groups in one of our departments of one of our companies, the sales company. It literally vacated an entire 4 staff people in one department that really we had to, in essence, completely start from scratch with that department. But at the end of the day, I feel like now it's even stronger, better. It will be having better longevity. So, I'm getting a different type of work product out of that group now, because now we have a different type of ethos. We have a different type of buy-in into the company and buy-in into the vision of the company. And so there's a difference in that. Now, going back, there are some people that had financial struggles. Okay. And that is something that everybody can help in specific ways. But the people who I found to be the ones that were the kind of the more frustrating ones were the ones that did not have the financial struggle, the ones that were making the most money in the company, and they were the ones with the least leniency, and were giving them the most, the most problems. And so that was really an eye opener. And some of the people who were making the least amount of money were the ones who really stepping up their game. And so it was very eye opening, and it was great for us to see. But yes, we did furloughs, we did pay cuts, we did all these different things to at all of our different companies, to be able to survive. And it's hard for some people to understand what type, are they essential to the business or not. So some people got furloughed and others did not. And that was also hard. Some people took that personally, or whatever that is. So you've got a lot of emotion. You've got a lot of just reactions, and so you're just dealing with a lot of HR during a wartime period of time.
I'd even say too, the tough conversations. I mean, what you're talking to here is, for all of you CEOs who've been through this with us, that you've started to have more tough conversations in 1 week than you're used to having in an entire year.
Oh, yeah, or years. So, and it was tough. I mean, but ultimately, you go through it and, and it does make you a better CEO. I now feel I am so much better at hiring folks. I'm so much better at having, more in-depth conversations. We are keeping some of these practices of transparency moving forward with our companies. And it really empowers your teams in a different way that I never had expected before. And so it's that empowering that they see where things are going. And of course, how we've structured everybody is that, it's, as the company does better, they do better. And so and you'll be surprised. Some of it is so minuscule in the big scheme of things, but it just makes them feel like they're part of the growth of the company. And as the company does better, they do better. And they just feel they buy into the company in a different way. And that was never a focus of mine in my past. And now it's 100% part of the way that we set up all of our employees and staff and managers.
That's awesome. So as a synopsis to this question, what I'm really hearing, and I really agree with the sentiment, is transparency is a must. Having those direct, honest, no bullshit conversations, and really being able to speak directly and honestly with your staff, having those tough conversations. And then last, which we touched on, but really kind of expand on here, is culture. I mean, we both agree here that during wartime, your focus as a CEO really has to amplify around developing that company culture, putting in those structures, getting those poison people out of the organization. Making sure you're really hiring for culture makes a huge, huge difference.
Yes. It changes the entire dynamic. I mean, 110%. I mean, you don't realize how much of a difference can it change.
It really does.
Work productivity, but it's just the way, people feel in the office, the way that people are, doing their jobs, the quality of work, everything. I mean, it affects every aspect of your business is the culture. And my quality of life. I mean, as a CEO, your quality of life goes up when you have better culture. And I will tell you, in my past, I was never I'm a bull in a china store most of the time, and culture was not on the top of my list. It was going after deals, making deals happen, making money, winning the business, and culture just always was kind of lingering after a lot of other things. And today, culture's in the top 5 and actually probably in the top 3 of the office. And now we really hire for culture. Because, my hiring process and interview process is so different than ever before.
I love hearing that.
So it's really, that is one major thing that just came out of this that I really am excited about moving forward of how it's going to change the company in the long term.
That's great.
Well, I'm disappointed that you gave such a short answer, but thank you for answering the question. What are some of the toughest conversations that CEOs are forced to have among all that? This is really a 2-part question, actually, now that I think of it. What are some of the toughest conversations CEOs are forced to have during wartime? And as a follow-up to that, how should CEOs navigate those conversations?
Well, I think there's different sides of this. I think you've got tough conversations with your clients, right? That, about, your work, the lack of success with a lot of things that are going on. I think that you also have financial stress. Financial stress in this time period, and, cash flow is king. And when your cash flow cuts off, you have to interject money. Yes, PPP helped and all these other things helped, but on the same token, you're still negative cash flow.
And yeah, most of us are still putting in our own cash.
You're exactly right. And so it was a substantial, cash infusions. And of course, companies have their money, but of course, we're using it, we're deploying it. And for me, with DE Texas, I had just launched. This was a startup.
Oh, yeah. And you were in startup mode. I was there.
Yeah. So it was a, shock to the system. But so, sometimes it's working out with your vendors. It's working out with your landlords, working out with all that. So those are all other conversations on top of everything you're doing from an HR perspective with your employees. It's also working with your people you owe money to, right? And so it's also, how do you control your budget? So a lot of things that you have to do is you have to look at all of your recurring expenses, and you have to start really is it a have to or a want to? And so you have to start cutting as much as you can, as fast as you can, to be able to try to, what is a have to versus a want to. And then, and it really starts to make you, focus on the pennies, because whenever you're having to put your own cash in again, which you've already put cash into these companies, and now you're having to fund it more cash. It's just one of those things that it's like, okay, what are have tos? How do I delay payments? How do I work things out? And of course, you have to pay what you have to pay. But it was a that's a dance. It's a strategy. It's all of those things, and it's not fun. It's not easy. And some people are more giving, and others are completely not. And so you're just having to work through some of that. But at the end of the day, you get through it, and so it's just making sure that you are. And I think with that, I think a lot of vendors just want communication. I think most of them, especially during this time period, were just saying, "Hey, let us know what you can pay when you can pay it, and just please live up to that." And
Exactly. I think that's the point. I mean, a lot of it has to do with integrity. It's your honoring your word around what you say. And if your people are generally pretty great, other business owners get it.
correct.
They're in the same shoes as you. So I think very much to your point, I think a lot of CEOs, especially young CEOs who haven't been through wartime before, they get very nervous to have these kind of conversations.
They get embarrassed. Their ego gets in the way. They get embarrassed. They feel like they're going to look less, less substantial or not strong enough in the marketplace or whatever it is. And the problem is that whenever you do that and you posture and you try to put on this front that you actually are fine and you're going to be able to pay them, and you can't, and you keep telling them, "I'm going to pay you by the end of the month," and you can't, it gets worse. Rather than just telling them, "Hey, I can pay you 25% at the end of the month, and I can pay you 25% every month." Now, they're not going to like that answer, but the thing is that by being blunt with them and telling them what that is, a lot of times they accept that, and they just ask for you to live to it, And so it's really just being blunt, living to that. And if you, for some reason, something else happens and you can't live to that, communicate it as soon as possible.
Exactly. You guys all listening right now, Jacob is saying absolute gold. How many of us have been in that position where we can't pay a bill? We're behind, something happened, a customer paid us late, so now we're paying someone else late, and we want a posture, and we're nervous about how it's going to make us as the CEO look and how it's going to make our company look, and we want to front a little bit. It's not the way to go. Be vulnerable, be honest, be authentic. That is the stuff that builds character. You're going to build a lot more respect with your vendor. And then on the other side of this conversation, which Jacob also mentioned, and Jacob, I would love for you to speak to this point too. When I'm working with my CEOs through wartime and I'm dealing with budgeting, I'm dealing with what is the company budget? What is the pared down or modified company budget? What do you have in reserves? What does your bare bones minimum budget look like? There's 3 different levels of budgets that we're considering. So we know when we hit bottom budget, everything gets cut. And so when you're dealing with your vendors and you're making promises, we need to make sure that those promises are showing up inside the budget, or else we're going to fail those promises, which is going to destroy reputation. So having those budgets and making clear, clean promises that line up to that budget is absolutely paramount.
Completely. And that's exactly what we did. We actually had our budgets for each company. We kind of had toggles, and of sort of like phase 1, 2, 3, 4 based off cash flow. And so we could turn on other things or pay different things at different times. And so based off cash flow. And so really that those toggles allowed us, we kind of already preset what were the bare minimums we had to pay no matter what. And then what were the things that we could pay as more cash flow came in. And what was interesting is you all remember, I mean, for at least in residential brokerage, I mean, all of a sudden it went high and we started making money again. And then all of a sudden it dropped down to nothing again because we had more outbreaks or whatever it was. And so we got shut down again. And so it was nothing was consistent. And that is the hardest because you're having to live week by week. I remember, and sometimes for the brokerage business and for our other businesses, the people had the right to terminate their contracts, or they had the right to get out of their deals. I mean, we lost so many deals on the brokerage side. I mean, millions of dollars in commissions we lost because the state of Texas came out with this addendum that allowed people to walk away from their purchase contracts by losing their earnest money. So on one of our penthouses, I mean, he walked away from $500,000, and he was happy to do so. So, but it was one of those things that was hard to take, but you just have to work around it. And so it's just, like I said, it's transparency. It's having a plan, understanding your budget, and having kind of where's your bare bones budget, and what do you still have to do just to keep the lights on, and then be able to then have different phases as things come out. But yeah, I mean, it's not fun, but the way you handle yourself in those times really shows about yourself. And I have to say, actually, some of the people, they like it whenever you come to them and kind of say, "Hey, I need your help because of this is the situation." They prefer to help you when you are being honest with them and telling them what really is going on, rather than saying, "Hey, nothing's wrong," and I'm fine, and then I'm going to pay you. I'll pay you by the end of the month, and you're not able to do so. And so a lot of folks would rather you just be honest with them and try to make a plan that works for everybody.
Yeah, participation is key, right? In all
Yep.
things with that, for sure. Coming to the table means everything.
Yeah, so we're talking about tough conversations. I want to take it one other direction before we wrap up this question. And I want to talk about staff performance. I know for me, for a lot of the CEOs that I'm working with over the last year and a half of this pandemic, we're dealing with people working remotely. And it's interesting, it's harder to keep an eye on your staff. People's performance has been all over the place. And it's a whole new world right now. Your kids aren't in school. You have your dog running through your Zoom meeting, and the kids are screaming in the background. It's just been chaos for people. So how are you dealing with having tough conversations around, one, people's performance, and two, just the fatigue and burnout of working remotely?
It's true. Some people are much better at working at home than others. And it's very clear to see the work performance and the kind of the output that they're able to do. And so for some folks, we've had to say, look, you're going to need to be in the office because it's just, there is such a drop off. And most of the time they realize it themselves as well. I mean, we've had many husbands, I will tell you, that say, please ask me to come back into the office so my wife, so I can get out of the house. Right. So, but yeah, it's actually kind of funny, but yeah, so I will say that it becomes, because we also work on a project management software. So we're able to kind of have dashboards as of where people are on all of their tasks and everything else of the nature. And so we're able to really kind of see what is the, how are they kind of, chewing down their tasks and where are they on their scales of different things. And it became very evident and very clear that some folks are set up for it and others are not. And so so we just had those blunt conversations and it's just saying, hey, look, we realize that you're having to work from home. We realize you have kids at home. How can we work this out? And in some instances, we had to work out stuff with them and say, look, okay, really, you're kind of working part time. Is that just what you want to do? Work part time? Is it, how can we make this work? So, if they're a good employee, you want to keep them. But in the same token, you need to work something out with them. But being honest with them about the situation and just saying, look, and most of the time, the good employees were the ones who were saying, yeah, I know. I can't get anything done. I can't concentrate, whatever it is. And so it's really just saying, well, do you think you can come in the office for 2 days a week and then you have to be home the rest? Or could you work half days or whatever it is? And so, and of course, there were instances where it just did not work, right? It's not going to work. COVID is too much of a scare for them. They can't be productive. It's just not a fit at the moment. And those are hard conversations to have as well. And, I'm afraid for everyone's company for wage.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, how many employees came and went?
Yeah, that's a good segue to, we talked about vendors and payments and being able to survive with keeping the lights on and stuff like that. But we talk about what other kinds of things change about the finances of a business during wartime, and what advice would you give a CEO or a business owner, in that situation about the larger finance changes? Like, all kinds of things beyond just paying bills, right?
Yeah. I mean, you've got to be looking at so many different aspects of this. You've got to be looking at your revenue sources, right? And you've got to be looking at, how are you making your money, and are those going to be hindered for quite some time longer? Do you have your lines of credit, or do you have other sources of capital to be able to get to, or are you just a high net worth guy that you can fund your company no matter what? And I'm not, I make great money and we do well, but I don't have $100 million in the bank myself. And these companies are not cheap to run.
And a lot of those credit sources were drying up. There were banks pulling credit lines left and right.
100%. And so it's really important that you have the ability and you kind of set yourself up to where where you can go if you need to. And so, for me, I had a liquidity event before all of this, which was great. And I had other things that were coming in and other cash flows. So I was actually, timing is everything. And it was beautiful that I not have that kind of stress. But I do know many of my other friends and colleagues and other businesses that did go through a lot of that. And I was able to help out some of them, and it's really just sourcing that. But it's really important that everybody, that you sort of have a backup financial plan, because you don't want your business to shut down, right? So the idea is sometimes you have to, pay a lot of money for it. Sometimes it's expensive, but it's worth it. And a lot of those guys that are willing to do that are guys that will maybe take it on the backside or say, hey, look, you can pay me over time, or look, I'll fund this. And then, but you got to have some of that. You've got to have kind of a backup capital source. And I have one right now just in case, the world comes to an end again for, 6 months, and I don't want everything just to go to go out the window. So you got to have those kind of things.
I think that's a really huge point. A really good wartime CEO is a CEO who really has thought through their finances. They have existing reserves in their company. I mean, I can't tell you how many companies I've interacted with in the last year and a half. When I see their P&L and I see their balance sheet, I realize they might have about a month of reserves set aside. And then you start asking them the tough questions like, okay, well, what if something were to happen? Or what if we're trying to expand quickly? What are other sources of capital do you have access to? And they're like, well, I have a credit card. No, that's the problem. We watched so many CEOs get hammered over the last year when they got thrown into wartime. They have no experience about what it takes to be a wartime CEO in the domain of finances, how to ask for it, how to get your hands on capital. What are the different kinds of capital you should have access to?
And how to structure the deal to get that capital. So I think that's a big deal is how do you structure it, right? I mean,
you're a master of this, Jacob. I know you. You have a lot of facility here.
Well, and I think that, there's a lot of ways to do it, right? I mean, you can get a capital infusion, you can do a preferential rate of return, you can have that at 100% accrue, you can pay it over, after 12 months, you can then, there's different ways. Selling a piece of your business is always the last resort. But the idea though is that if you can have the right to buy it back at a 12%, pref, that goes on that money, or preferred return, that then you're able to get that, buy it back. There's all kinds of ways of skinning the cat just so you can get through it, right? And so I think it's just knowing what are some different ways to structure it, and who are those guys that are in the marketplace that I can go to get that done if I have to. And so I remember, and when I was in Corpus Christi, I had a moment in that time that I had that moment where I had to go to one of those guys. And, it was not cheap, but I got through it. I learned, I paid it, and it was great. And now I'm just in a different type of position financially, but it's one of those things that you just need to understand how to structure it, who to go to, and understanding that. But I will say that I think that most business owners I know do not have that source, or do not have an idea of how to structure it if something came up like that, because most people that I do know, that they don't have, well, no one expected a year of a pandemic, or, or some of these major things that we've occurred. I mean, here in Texas, we had the Stormageddon, and that shut us down for a whole week. And so, I mean, just even most of these businesses, I mean, without cash flow for a week, it really hurts you. So it's just, so it's just time and time again, there's things that are affecting cash flow. And so that's why, we're investing in many different things that have their, alternative cash flows. Real estate has cash flow, but when people are not paying the rent, you don't have that cash flow. So, I mean, I don't think anyone has really, it was tough for anybody to think about how everyone would stop paying on everything. But that's why you have to have these backup plans, and it's important that you think about that and have a path forward for that.
Absolutely. I think, just to sum up this question, the two different things that I recommend that all CEOs have is very much like what Jacob said. Really have a finance plan. Have your three budgets: your regular budget, your conservative budget, and your bare bones budget. Have that all figured out ahead of time. And then also your capital sources. Have that figured out. Who are they? How are you going to structure the deals? Work all that out ahead of time, even though you may never have to use this. And then second, the other side of the coin, which is revenue. Make sure your business has multiple sources of revenue. I think a lot of people, especially during the pandemic, got really creative, and we all started to find new ways of making money. And some revenue streams got diminished, but other revenue streams really grew and actually became really fruitful. So part of having a very good plan as a wartime CEO is knowing, if stuff hits the fan, how are you going to adjust from a revenue perspective? How are we going to adjust on the budget side of things? And that mashup, the revenue streams plus the budget, that mashup really helps you survive.
And I would also say that you need to be able to make decisions and make them quickly, and wartime, and be able to pivot very quickly. And I think so we did much better than most other companies in all of our different companies, because we made decisions and we pivoted very quickly even before others did.
Oh my gosh. So I have that on my notes too. It's so true. And I'm really glad you brought this back up, because I didn't want to forget it. I saw so many CEOs that this is their first time being in wartime. And they kind of froze. They were like, this will pass.
They did. And they didn't make any changes. They didn't change their course of business. They didn't reduce overhead. They didn't change, people. They just froze.
Yeah, they got slaughtered. They wasted tens of thousands of dollars that they could have cut instantly.
Or millions. I mean.
Yeah, or millions.
Yeah. I even noticed that as well, just with all the people in my sphere. It very quickly became two buckets of people. There were people who identified it as an opportunity, as insensitive as that felt and sounded at the time. It was just, if we're going to survive, if we're going to continue to provide for ourselves and the people around us, we have to pivot quickly and keep going forward. And there were a lot of people who went into wait and see mode. That's another euphemism for froze, but there were a lot of people who were of the mindset that it was going to go back to normal very quickly. And you just never know.
And you don't. And I will tell you, when we pivoted very quickly, because we interpreted it and read the writing on the wall that this was not going to be just a short-term thing. And so, and we got, our, some people threw some mud in our face, mainly. I mean, a couple clients did, and especially the staff. Some of the staff people were like, look, we don't even, why are you furloughing us so quickly? Or why are you doing this and all that? But now you look back, and those were right decisions. And that's the hard part, I think, is we have to make as CEOs very tough decisions. And, we're responsible for the health of the organization. And we're responsible for the health and the well-being. And at the end of the day, sometimes you have to cut off a limb. Sometimes you have to be able to do whatever it takes to keep the body alive. And so, and especially if you know that you can grow that limb back, it makes it sometimes easier, at least from like overall conceptual side of things. But you still have the emotional part. You still have the, you feel for these people. You really care about these people because they're part of your organization. But and many times, with unemployment, some of our people were making more on unemployment than they were being as employees. So, so it's just making, like, we actually sat down with every person and we're like, okay, do you have a plan? Let us help you with a plan. Let us help you apply for unemployment. Let us help you do these things. And that really went a long way with a lot of our folks. But I think that, we did get, moving, pivoting quickly was part of our success, and where we were able to truly conserve capital, and really be able to, not have the huge cash infusions that many of our competitors had to do.
Well said. Very well said.
So the final question here, kind of coming around the bend, is when it comes to being a wartime CEO, of course, it's extremely challenging, of course, especially if it's the first time, right? Aaron, you used a euphemism for that earlier in the episode. The amount of pressure that is on you to quote unquote save the company while providing stability and remaining stoic, often having to fire staff, like furlough staff, financial cuts that need to be made. We've covered a lot of that stuff. What do you have for CEOs in the way of advice for managing the stress and the pressure that just comes with the territory?
Well, one thing is I started working out even harder, and in the morning. So I go to the gym every day at 5 o'clock or 5:30, and so it's just like, I ended up gaining a lot of weight, but I got not fat. I actually got bigger because that was my way to relieve stress, right? So it was a major deal for me of just kind of starting weightlift in a much and heavier way, because it was awesome. So you have to have something that you can relieve stress that way. Of course, in my opinion, it could be, sports or something of that nature. Also, I have to tell you, dealing with the stress, so the stress level you've got stress and you've got anxiety, but you also have the work-life balance where your family also sees this from you. They feel this from your side. And you're also having to, and I will tell you, like, we delayed building our next big house, by a year, because we didn't know how long this was going to go for, or like, what's going to happen. And so, you kind of put a lot of personal things on pause too. You don't know how much money you're going to have to fund in the company. You don't know how long it's going to last. So, even from a personal side of things, you need to put some things on pause until you at least understand how long, or, what this runway looks like and how long this thing's going to be. So you're managing all of these things all at once. And it really, I think the thing from our perspective, or the way that I think from managing that stress, is you just have to take one thing at a time. But for me, I had to lay it all out. And every day I had to lay out what were my priorities for that day in the very beginning, and make sure at least I tried to accomplish those 3 to 4 things. Because at the end of the day, you've got 100 things you should be doing every day, but you really have 3 to 4 major things you have to get done. So I made sure that I understood that on a daily basis, so that I got those 3 or 4 major items accomplished. And of course, with one item, there's probably 10 or 15 steps. But the thing is that working those through and making sure that you get those accomplished is very important. And don't let all the noise. There's a ton of noise that hits you in these instances. And you've got to be able to, you've got to be able to take a step back. You've got to understand where people are coming from. You can't take things personally. And that's very hard. It's very easy to say, but hard to do. And so you've got to kind of, think of yourself and continue to say, look, taking medicine does not always taste great, but at the end of the day, you're there to save the body. It's there to save the body and to save the company. And it's tough on you. I mean, it's not an easy path. And truly the hardest part are the people. Your people are by far the hardest part. The cash flow, you can manage it, you can talk, you can work your way through it, you can borrow money, you can do all these things. That's actually not as bad as dealing with your people. People who have helped you build the company, people who have been with you for years, people who that they're in hardships, they're in worse shapes than you. They don't make near the money you do, and so it's just one of the things that it's very hard. That's the emotional toll with your folks is by far the hardest aspect of this.
And that's what makes such a great CEO, right? Is that you're able to endure that thick skinness and kind of process that emotion, that sometimes that guilt and that worry that comes with the territory. I think sometimes I would even add, and Jacob, I'd love your 2 cents on this, is with a lot of CEOs, obviously, I'm their advisor. I create a safe space for them that we can talk. There's no judgment. There's no evaluation. I can really help them strategize. So I think having an advisor on your team makes a huge difference as a CEO, but also having a peer group. And Jacob, I know you shared that you have a set of advisors that you interact with, but I think having that peer group is paramount for wartime CEOs.
100%, because you learn so much. Oh, you handled it that way. Oh, what about this way? Or you did this, and you're able to bounce ideas off of them. And what you find is everybody's going through the same thing.
Everybody
I
is.
mean, everybody.
There's nothing that's that unique.
No. And so you're able to see things from different perspectives. You're able to hear different ways they attempted it. I don't think anybody had a silver bullet of having it done the exact right way. None of us had experienced anything like this. And so it was just great to hear different ideas of how they handled different situations. And I picked and pulled from different folks around me, and it was great. And so, actually, I have to say, it's really funny. My gym crew in the morning, it's a very, it's a lot of CEOs, a lot of, people in the business community. And so a lot of times it was just conversation in the gym got me thinking about different things, and it was just, the chitter chatter in there about, hey, what about this? And what about that? And how did you handle this? And, oh, well, we did this. And another guy says, well, we did that. And so it's just having that. But then also I have a mentor, and going to him and talking to him. I've got my peer group. I mean, all of those things really make a difference. And my mentor, of course, is the one who really has got me on from a cash flow perspective and make sure that we have those resources to be able to back me up. And when you know that you have a backup plan financially. And yeah, it's expensive. Yeah, you don't want to do it. You're going to work your ass off not to make that happen. But you have that parachute if you have to have it. That makes a huge difference in your stress level. And then you can really spend more time focusing on the HR side of things. And your decision making. You make better decisions. 100% you do. And so I think everyone has to have, and look, pulling that parachute cord is damn expensive. But you know what? You need to have it. And sometimes it's people that are in your same industry that are just more, have been there longer, have more cash flow or more liquidity. And so a lot of times it's just making sure that you've got that parachute that if you have to pull it, you can always pull it.
Are you a skydiver, Jacob?
Yes, I actually am.
Sure, that doesn't surprise me. So you're using that reference so casually. Are you normally a risk taker, thrill seeker kind of person?
I am.
So is that to you tie into why you might be so uniquely suited to navigate these high pressure situations? Something tells me that's not a coincidence.
Well, I enjoy it. I mean, I find I like the challenge. I will say that. I like the challenge from a business wise. I actually always think, I always remember the story of the San Francisco earthquake and the fires that broke out afterwards, and how all the safes had been sealed shut because of the fire, and there was only one bank that actually moved their money out of town after the earthquake before the fires hit, and so they were the only bank that was able to actually give people money and lend, and that's now Bank of America, and it was all because of how, in a bad situation, they were thoughtful and they made a decision against everybody else's, and they came out of it ahead. And so I find myself in these kind of situations, at least from a business perspective. I like the idea of finding new ways of doing my business, more efficient ways, more integrating more technology or integrating more systems and processes, and changing things to adapt to the current market conditions. And I really like that component of it.
So would you say that that's an important quality in any CEO, is that kind of the natural passion and instinct to rise to the occasion and to adapt on the fly?
100%. I think that is, I mean, one thing that's consistent is change. And I think that change is happening more often than ever in the past. And our industries, no matter what industry you're in, it's changing quickly. And so I think that for all of us, we have to position ourselves and be in a mindset that we have to be able to pivot. We have to be able to be creative, finding alternative ways of doing our businesses, and being able to just be able to take advantage. And when we find an opportunity, seize on it and go forward. And yes, you're going to make mistakes. Yes, you're going to drop balls. Yes, you're going to waste some money. Yes, you're going to do things. But at the end of the day, ultimately, if you don't do those things, you're going to fail, or you're not going to be as successful as you should have been or could have been. And so that's really where, it's really charging forward. And
right. And your decision making, I bet
100%.
You make better decisions.
And I think that that's really, like I said, the hardest part of the employees and the HR components of this, for me at least. I can navigate the change of the environment. I can navigate the financial side of things, because it's all about just strategy and how you work it out. But being a CEO, you've got a lot of different hats. You've got a lot of different interests from all the folks involved in your world. You're from your clients to your staff, your finances, your
right.
everything, your family. And it's really just for you to be able to, balance all of that and be able to manage it. And of course, you're going to have to put things on the back burner, and people are going to scream and they're going to holler and they're going to say, why haven't you returned my phone call, or why haven't you done this? But in the same token, you've got to focus on what you need to be doing to move that ball forward in the right direction. And I always say, focus on dollar productive activities, delegate as much as you can, really get out there and make sure that you are focused on what you need to be focused on that day, because the noise will suck you in, and it will suck you in so fast. And if you don't control, where you're spending your time and what you're focused on that day, you're going to be lost, and you'll be caught in the chaos. And especially in wartime, the chaos is consuming. And and so it's really important that you stay on track of the track that that's going to make you successful.
Well, that's if that isn't a 5-course meal of wisdom from somebody who's been through it all, I don't know what is. Aaron, this was not only an incredible Build-isode, but what a fitting example of what it means to be a Titans episode. Jacob, I can't thank you enough for everything that you've shared with us. And as we kind of close here to wrap the show, where can people find you if they wanted to get in touch? Do you have any causes that you're supporting and want to shout out or plug, or anywhere on social you want people to connect with you?
You easily can find me on social, just Jacob Sudhoff. I'm the only Jacob Sudhoff in the world. So, but I will say that, I'm, with Douglas Elliman, so always on there as well. There's a lot of causes that we are involved in. We actually have Elliman Cares. We have a nonprofit we have set up that, that we contribute, match our agents on money. And we also have all of our companies donate to the nonprofit. Then we sponsor all kinds of different things in Texas. And right now it's only been focused on Houston. Now, as we roll out through the state of Texas, we're going to be starting to do things throughout the state. But it's really important that, that you get back, and that, and for my husband and I, it's very important that we really lay the groundwork for our kids. And that people know that this is, that, look, we're here for only a certain amount of time. It's really important that we really focus on, kind of the overall picture of life. And I think, giving back, and the people around you are, it's what life is all about. And family at the end of the day is the most important.
What a beautiful sentiment to end the episode. Aaron, wasn't that nice?
I love that. And we can put all of Jacob's contact information and all the nonprofits and charities into the show notes, so you guys can find it there.
Absolutely. Anybody looking to make sure they're supporting somebody who cares about these issues, we'll make sure the information is all available to you. So with that, Jacob Sudhoff from Douglas Elliman, Texas, thank you so much for joining us today on the Buildify Method Podcast. And Aaron Keith, our host, thank you so much always for putting this together and for having this incredible network of relationships that you can bring such high quality guests to the show that I'm honored to co-host with you. I want to thank everybody in our audience for listening today. Please make sure to check the show notes for the details we talked about. And make sure to follow us on Apple iTunes and to leave us a review. Subscribe. Make sure you give us a 5-star. It helps everybody find us. It helps the algorithm make sure the show is exposed to as many entrepreneurs and like-minded business owners just like you, to help us expand the community and to help people find and take advantage of the content and the conversations we're trying to share with the community. Make sure to follow the Buildify Method and Buildify Systems on Instagram. And we look forward to talking to you soon, everybody. Thank you so much for listening.